how much control do we actually have over how well or how poorly we are sleeping?
If your overall health is good, then usually your sleep is going to be good as well. So the kinds of foods you eat before bed really matter. Your bed needs to be a place that your brain associates comfort and sleep with, not stress in. Sleep apnea is perhaps one of the most dangerous sleep disorders and also dangerous health conditions that not many people are acknowledging. You have a times increase in your risk for most forms of cancer.
On today's episode of the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast, we are joined by Dr. Chelsie Rohrscheib, a neuroscientist, sleep expert, and head researcher at Wesper. Chelsie has over a decade of experience in sleep science, holds a PhD in neuroscience with a specialty in sleep genetics, and has worked extensively in clinical trials focused on sleep apnea and brain health. She specializes in the intersection of sleep, cognition, exercise, and neuroscience. And today we're breaking down what sleep is actually doing to your brain, how it shows up in real life, and what matters most if you want to feel sharper, calmer, and more like yourself again. Enjoy today's episode. Welcome back to the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast. I am joined by Dr. Chelsie Rohrscheib, who is our sleep expert. She is going to give you everything that you need to know about how to get the best sleep, how to recover best, and I think some of us need to be convinced that sleep is really important and that it might be a missing piece in our health puzzle. So welcome, Chelsie. It is so great to have you on the podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. This is my all-time favorite topic. It's what I think about most of the day. So happy to be a part of this podcast.
I am so glad that you said that because I think for a lot of us, it's an afterthought or like a maybe if I get to it. Or, in my best life, I will get 8 hours of sleep. But like in this one, I'm just working on 5. So I really I'm just so excited to talk to you about a bit of the neuroscience behind this because you are an incredible expert in this area. I want to start out with maybe our listeners being able to identify themselves in some of the signs that someone might think have to do with, I'm just stressed, or, I'm aging, or, this is just how I am now, but actually might be sleep affecting their brain.
Mhm. So, sleep is an incredibly important and essential process. I mean, there's a reason why we spend a third of our life asleep. It accomplishes many biological functions that don't occur while we're awake to maintain health and just general well being as well. So, when we are not getting sufficient sleep, this is raising our risk for a variety of issues, including cognitive issues, mood problems, a general sense of not being as well as you possibly could be. And in the longer term, it really raises our risk for numerous chronic health conditions like cardiovascular disease and diabetes. And we also know that a lot of health issues and just general problems can often be related to sleep loss or chronically poor sleep. So these are things like an inability to focus as well as perhaps you used to, a poor memory, so difficulty recalling memories. Maybe you're finding it more difficult to learn new information and recall that information. General changes in mood. So if you feel like your mood has declined slightly, not necessarily going into like a full on depressive state, but if you feel like you're moodier than usual or you're less tolerant to stress, that's a big indication. And then there's other things too, like general health issues. So if you're suddenly pre-hypertensive, if your blood pressure spikes a little bit, if you find that you're getting ill more often than you used to, maybe you're getting more colds and flu. So things like that are all really good signs that perhaps you're not getting enough good quality sleep.
So let me ask you this before we kind of get into the big questions on sleep. Why sleep for you? Why did you choose to really narrow in on this particular topic?
Yeah, that's a really great question. It's both kind of by accident and also for personal reasons. So, initially, I went to school for biomedical science, which is just the science of medicine. It's kind of like pre med, but a little bit more advanced than that. I always knew I wanted to go into research. I just didn't know what area I wanted to specialize in. And eventually, after I did my undergrad, and I started my PhD process. I was really interested in how different things that occur in the brain can affect different behaviors. So, not just sleep, but things like navigation and mood, but that's also when I discovered sleep as a neuroscience concept. So one of those topics was how does infections in the brain specifically affect sleep? Does it cause too much sleeping? Does it cause insomnia? And that's where I really caught the sleep bug because I really gained an education about how important sleep is and all the processes that sleep drives and how sleep is connected to nearly every system in your body. And also how sleep is often connected to almost all chronic diseases that we're aware of. And so that's when I said, you know what, I love this. I'm going to hyper specialize in sleep. So once I finished with my PhD, I went on to do my postdoc studies, and that's when I really focused in on like the genetics of sleep and what is actually controlling sleep. Eventually, I went in more to the clinical side, so I started working with humans, looking more so at sleep disorders. Yeah.
So this is, I'd like to say that the majority of people are well versed on how important sleep is because it is one of the biggest industries as far as products and marketing. When people aren't getting enough sleep, they will do anything. They will buy anything. They will try anything. So I think that it's understood how important it is, but I really want to hit home on why and whether or not, half of these products that are being marketed to many of us who might think we are sleep deprived are actually effective. So, the first thing I want to ask you is how fast does poor sleep start affecting us? Like, is it one bad night of sleep where we start going like, whoa, or are we talking days, weeks? Like, where are we starting to see ourselves affected cognitively and just in general areas of our life?
Mhm. Yeah, so that's a really good question. So, there's a pretty typical progression of signs and symptoms associated with sleep loss. So, if you're somebody who usually sleeps well, but you have one bad night of sleep, you may not necessarily feel the effects of that one bad night
Okay.
because what happens is our brain is always keeping tabs on the specific amount of sleep we actually need to accomplish all of those restorative functions that sleep actually does in the brain and the body. So, one bad night of sleep is really not going to affect those overall functions too much. And the feeling that you experience the next day is not necessarily going to be severe. So you may feel a little bit tired or groggy, but it's not necessarily going to have a major effect on like your cognitive functions. For instance, you still might be able to get through your workday just fine. Now, I want to kind of backtrack a little bit and say everyone's a little bit different. So some people are more affected than others. Some people, they don't feel any sleep loss at all. Some people do tend to feel it and they have a really strong urge to take a nap. Now, after a few days of chronic sleep loss, so when I say chronic sleep loss, I really mean like day after day after day. This is when you're going to start seeing a pretty dramatic decline. You're really going to have some difficulty focusing. So you might find it difficult to pay attention to your work or, the other things you're doing in your life. Maybe it's attending to your children. Maybe it's social activities. Maybe it's a sport. You may feel like your brain is moving a lot slower than usual. We usually call this brain fog. Those processes in your brain are just not happening as quickly or as sharply as you're normally used to. And you may find that you're just a little bit more prone to stress. So, stressful things that may not have bothered you previously may get on your may get on your nerves a lot faster. Now that's the initial phase of sleep loss. Um, Longer term, so we're talking weeks to months, this is when you're going to start seeing a major decline. You might have issues with your memory. You might find that you're having a strong urge to sleep and it's actually affecting your ability to get through the day and complete all the tasks that you need to complete. Your work may decline. If you're a student, you might start seeing your school performance decline. This is where we really start seeing a major drop off in mood. So you might start feeling more anxious than usual. You might start feeling quite depressed. And you also may find that your social life really declines as well, because when you're chronically tired, you really don't feel inclined to spend time with other people and interact with other people. Now, once we move beyond that, once we start going into, 6 months to a year, that's when we start seeing all the negative health impacts. So, um, sleep is very, very crucial for maintaining brain health and overall body health. And this is because sleep restores the body, it repairs damage that you accumulate to your cells and your tissues and your muscles. It does brain maintenance. So it works on all of those sensitive neuron cells, which are the main communicating cells in the brain. It helps you consolidate memories from short term memories into long term memories. And it also helps with hormone release. And these are just a few of the processes. So there's actually many more. And so, if you're not getting sufficient sleep and these processes are not occurring, you start building up damage in your brain and body. And this can translate to things like cardiovascular disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes. It raises your risk for certain types of cancers. It raises your risk for neurodegenerative diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And it also massively raises your risk for severe mood disorders. So things like depression and anxiety disorders as well.
That's incredible. I've never heard sleep linked to types of cancer before.
Mm.
That really blew me away. I think that the link to Alzheimer's is becoming more mainstream, and you know, when we're thinking about ourselves as individual and sort of unique sleepers, because you mentioned, everybody being different and your brain sort of keeping tabs on your own sleep habits and what you kind of are needing. A lot of people say, I'm a bad sleeper. I've always been a bad sleeper. I struggle. Um, how true is that? How much control do we actually have over how well or how poorly we are sleeping? Are there people that struggle to sleep more than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about 50-50. So a lot of it is genetic. So these are things we're born with. So variants in our DNA that are passed down from our parents that make us a lot more prone to certain sleep disorders like insomnia and sleep apnea, for example. And a lot of it is also environmental and behavioral. So, you know, what do we do in our daily life that impacts our sleep? A lot of times we call these habits sleep hygiene habits. So it's really anything that we do during the day and during the night while we're asleep that impact the actual quality of our sleep. So, the obvious sleep hygiene habits are don't drink caffeine too late in the day. Make sure you're not staring at bright lights, especially from like electronic devices right before you go to bed. make sure your bedroom environment is conducive to sleep. So, on one hand, you may have a predisposition to having a lot of sleep issues. You may be a very light sleeper. You may be somebody with a high anxiety level, and that prevents you from sleeping soundly. On the other hand, there are active steps you can take to improve your overall sleep quality. Now, some people with severe sleep disorders, they can change all of the habits and behaviors in their life, and they can still have poor sleep. And in that case, those are the individuals who usually need medical intervention. But I would say the large majority of people, if they really focus on their sleep hygiene habits and also their general overall health, so what they're eating, their exercise, their daily well being, they can usually see good results with improved sleep quality.
I'm really excited to talk about where nutrition and exercise come into sleep and where that all intersects. But the first thing I want to ask you before we sort of dive into those topics is we all have someone that tells us that they are crushing it on 4 hours of sleep. Like that's where they live. And they claim to have no signs of needing more sleep or of being sleep deprived. Are there people that are functioning fine on very little sleep? Is it real, or is their brain sort of used to a pattern and has learned to adapt, but the negatives are still like the health negatives are still festering?
So, the large majority of individuals need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. That has been scientifically proven over and over and over and over again. That's because all these biological processes that occur during sleep, they take time to occur.
Mm,
You just cannot effectively get these processes done in a few hours of sleep. And the reason for this is, I mean, not only can these processes take a long time, but we also cycle through different stages of sleep. And some of these processes only occur during deep or REM sleep, for instance.
okay.
So if you're not allowing yourself a sufficient amount of time to accumulate enough deep or REM sleep, you're going to get a lot of accumulation of body wide damage. You're going to get brain issues. The list goes on as far as how this actually affects your health. Now, there is a very, very tiny subset of the population that is genetically um, different. So these are individuals that can survive and maintain health on less sleep, but certainly not 4 hours of sleep.
I
So
was gonna
these,
say, what's less?
yeah, so these people are more in kind of like the 6 to 7 hour
Okay.
range.
Okay.
Um, the science has shown over and over and over again that people who consistently get less than 6 hours of sleep are at major, major risk for chronic health conditions like cardiovascular disease, heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and early death compared to
Wow.
individuals who sleep longer. So when somebody says, I do well on 4 hours, usually I believe a few things. One, I believe that they can probably get through 4 hours of sleep for a while, and then eventually they will have some sort of sleep crash and they'll have to pay off all that sleep debt. Usually this happens on the weekends. They just don't like to talk about it very much. But if you track their sleep diaries that we have them fill out, it's very clear that they have to pay off a lot of that sleep debt. Two, a lot of these individuals who claim that they, get enough from 4 hours of sleep, um, you're absolutely right. They're just used to it. They're
Mm,
used to feeling tired. They're used to not feeling 100%, and it's become kind of their normal. We also see this a lot in people with sleep disorders. So, people, for instance, with sleep apnea who have had sleep apnea for years and years, it just becomes their new normal and they accept it and they don't necessarily acknowledge that it's a problem. And then third, I also think these people who generally are like in the 4 hour club are also what we consider to be health optimizers. So they're people who just really eat really well and they exercise and they live a really healthy lifestyle. And that in itself can offset some of those symptoms that people get from sleep deprivation. So it kind of gives you like this false sense that you're actually okay, um, when in reality that damage is accumulating over time.
I'm really glad you said that because I totally can identify that being, that type A kind of personality. I wake up at 3 a.m. to get my workout in, and these are seen as sort of badges of honor. And wow, you're really driven. You're really health conscious. But hearing that that damage is accumulating despite the fact that you may be replacing sleep with what we would consider in all cases a healthy habit like working out or meal prepping or whatever it is that us type A's are out there doing instead of sleeping, that can't be replaced by it can be masked but it can't be necessarily replaced. I'm really glad you said that.
Hey, you.
Thanks for getting in touch with the Thick Thighs Save Lives podcast.
We love your questions and adore hearing from you.
Leave us a hello,
A burning question,
feedback.
or anything else you want to share with us on the podcast.
We will play your message live on air if we can.
Thanks for being an amazing friend. Stay safe and moving.
You mentioned deep sleep, REM sleep, the varying like cycles of sleep. A lot of people are familiar with those now from wearing wearables. And I was wondering, first of all, what is the optimum amount of time that we should be in those varying sleep stages? And can we really tell by wearing something like a watch or a ring or one of the many wearables on the market? How accurate are those in telling us how long we're staying in, say, deep sleep? Can we really count on that as like okay, I checked that box. I'm good on my deep sleep.
Mhm. I get this question all the time. I feel like I get this question at least once or twice a week. There's a lot of consumer wearables available on the market. Usually it's a wrist worn device. There's also rings that are available now. And they track a variety of things, not only when you're asleep, but when you're awake as well. And what one of the things that they do is they estimate the amount of time you're in each sleep stage. So there's 4 different stages. There's 3 non-REM stages. That's stage 1, light sleep, stage 2, which is like a medium sleep or a transition stage, and stage 3 is deep or slow wave sleep. So deep sleep is when a lot of those processes are occurring in the brain and body. And then there's also a 4th stage, rapid eye movement sleep or REM sleep. And this is when we're actively dreaming. There are many processes that occur in REM sleep as well. Now, really, the only way to know 100% which stage of sleep you're in is with a device called an EEG, which is basically a bunch of sensors that go all over your head and directly monitor your brainwave activity. Without an EEG, we can only predict which stage you're in based off of other physiological parameters. And these are usually things like heart rate, your SpO2, your pulse, your body movement, things like that.
Okay.
So they're they're a good they're getting more accurate. I will give them credit. They are getting more accurate. They are a good general guide. So they're pretty good at telling you approximately what stage you're in. It's not accurate enough for me personally to feel comfortable with revolving my entire sleep and life around what that device is saying. So, if your watch is telling you you're not getting enough deep sleep, but you're waking up and you feel great, you feel refreshed, then it's probably not super correct. On the other hand, if your watch is saying you're getting plenty of REM sleep, but you're waking up and you feel horrible and groggy and unrested, then that's probably also not correct. So take that information with a grain of salt. And certainly, if there's any indication that you have a real sleep issue or a sleep disorder, you should be talking to a medical provider because you may need an actual medical sleep study. Uh,
So, out of the 4, is there a most important? And, Oh, the other thing that I wanted to ask you about REM sleep was like when you're I know REM sleep is important and I'll let you explain why, but when we're dreaming, if we're having like a really exhausted, like kind of situation in our dream, is that actually restful?
Yeah, so REM
I'm
sleep.
running. I've
Yeah.
run like 3 miles in this dream and I'm waking up tired.
REM sleep has kind of been the Scooby Doo mystery of sleep for a really long time. We knew that deep sleep was super crucial for all of those biological processes a lot easier and a lot sooner than we knew about what REM sleep did. And because REM sleep's really confusing, right? It's a very different looking stage compared to the other three.
It's like, why?
Yeah. You, you have a lot more brain activity during REM sleep than the other three. So, like when you look at a brain in REM, it looks a lot like somebody who's awake. And that's confusing to us because
That's
we're
bizarre.
why is the brain working so hard when it's supposed to be resting? Well, with years and years of science, we kind of have answers now. So, one, REM is really important for memory consolidation. So, when you learn things, or even when you're not intentionally learning, you're still accumulating knowledge. Like you're still thinking about like your grocery list, or you have to remind yourself to pick your kid up from school at a certain time. That information initially gets stored in the brain as a short-term memory. So this is a memory that can last like a day, maybe two, and then eventually it will go away. The brain will get rid of it. It doesn't prioritize it as being important. Now, if a memory is really, really important, and this is something that you've been really focusing on, such as like studying for an exam, for instance, your brain will take those memories during REM sleep and transfer them to a completely different area of the brain for long term storage. So, the only way to have learning and long term memory recall is through REM sleep processes. Besides learning, REM is also really important for emotional processing. So during the day, we all experience different stressors. Sometimes we experience different threats in our environment. Maybe we were walking across the street and a car almost hit us. Maybe there was like a scary dog loose in our neighborhood. Our brain is constantly working on evaluating the world for those threats and then processing it to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So we think that dreaming is a little bit of a byproduct of this. So your dreams are kind of replaying those threats in kind of a nonsensical way. Like even your dreams don't necessarily even have to match the threat that occurred to you in real life. But what this is doing is it's preparing your brain to deal with those threats and be able to respond to them in a sufficient manner in your waking life. So that's why we can have some really intense, like almost non-restful feeling dreams. We tend to see these dreams occur more when we're under a lot of stress. So if you're got a lot of work stress, for instance, a stress is seen as a threat. So you'll have a lot of stressful dreams during that time as well.
That's so wild and interesting. We're like training while we're training for the threats,
Right. Right.
even when we're dead to the world. That's very, very interesting. I want to deep dive, and we will definitely. I have some questions about sleep apnea. I know you mentioned that in some of your prior responses, and I know that some of our listeners are very invested in what you have to say on that. But the first thing I want to talk to you about is exercise,
Hmm.
because I think that we are all kind of under the impression that moving more during the day promotes more restful sleep. Like that's an obvious kind of we can make that connection. But what about the when and the how? I think that a lot of people are like, the only time that I have to work out is kind of at night. And am I ruining my night's sleep? Or is the intensity of my workout matter when it comes to how much I'm being able to rest at night? So, is there a way to sort of maximize our workouts to promote the best sleep?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just preface this by saying that exercise is really important for sleep for several reasons. So it's not just, you know, exercise makes me healthy, therefore I'll sleep better. Exercise releases a lot of feel good endorphins, which promote general well being, which really plays a role in your ability to fall asleep during the night. So the less stress you feel at night, the more likely you are to calm your brain and be able to fall asleep. Exercise is also really important for blood flow to the brain. So, when you exercise, you get better oxygenated blood flow. This promotes brain health. And as we know, the brain is responsible for sleep and sleep cycles. So, a healthier brain, healthier sleep. And then the other big one that I always like to touch on is when we exercise, especially if it's heart raising, intense exercise, our body actually has to release a lot of cortisol into our bloodstream to help us get through that workout. So, most people know cortisol is our stress hormone, but it has a lot of other functions as well. It keeps us energized, it keeps us in a state where we can actually maintain our workout and push through the pain and push through the fatigue. And that's great for sleep because cortisol is very, very wake promoting and very stimulating. So if you have too much circulating cortisol in your blood when you put your head on the pillow, it's kind of like taking a shot of caffeine. It's going to give you too much stimulation. By exercising earlier in the day, you're using up all of those cortisol stores so that it's not circulating as much when it's time to go to bed. Now, one thing to consider is yes, exercise is great, but the timing of exercise is also really, really important. So, going back to the cortisol argument, if you're somebody who is exercising an hour or two before bed, you're getting that massive spike of cortisol into your bloodstream, but you're not really giving that enough time to dissipate and go away. So, it's really, really important that you try to exercise either in the first half of the day, if you're somebody who's really prone to sleep issues, or give yourself like a 2 to 3 hour window before bed. What this can result in, if you don't, is something that we use the term runner's insomnia a lot because runners who do like high intensity marathon running tend to experience a lot of insomnia. And this is because they're running so hard that that cortisol is really kicking around. So if you can avoid exercising immediately before sleep, but make sure you're still getting your daily exercise, that's going to be the optimal situation for good sleep quality.
That is incredibly good advice. I am sometimes stuck between, okay, this is the only time I have. Is it better to exercise if I'm going to only have like a small window before I'm going to try to go to bed? Or is it better to skip it and then maybe have a more restful night's sleep, but then didn't feel like I moved enough during the day? So, what would you say to anybody who's sort of struggling with that decision where they're like, I might not get the optimal like 3 hours before bed, but maybe I could get 2 or an hour and a half. Like, is it worth doing it?
I think it is, but I think
Okay.
you have to really change up the type of exercise you're doing. So instead of doing like the high cardio, high intensity exercise, maybe just go for a walk. Maybe do yoga, maybe do like really gentle, low weight lifting, things like that. So exercise that's still going to be beneficial to you, but it's not going to raise your heart rate so much that you have to spike your cortisol to actually keep your heart rate up. And definitely not high intensity weightlifting as well.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, I feel like that is so helpful when it comes to, like, when we're in that decision phase and it having something to say like, "Okay, yes, I'm still gonna work out, but I'm going to keep a conversational pace, or I'm going to do something a little bit lower intensity," is a really nice, like, in between where you can still move. Let's talk about, nutrition for a minute. Good nutrition leads to good sleep, true or false?
Oh, absolutely true. Yes,
Is
100%.
there, like, for people who may be struggling, are there foods to avoid during the day? Are there foods to gravitate towards during the day? What are there times to eat that are better than others to maximize our sleep?
Mhm. So, I mean, this is really stereotypical, but having a well-balanced diet is the best thing you can do for your sleep, not just for your sleep, but your overall health. If your overall health is good, then usually your sleep is going to be good as well. So, you need things like low fat, high protein meals. Um, you do want some healthy fats in there. So, things like avocados, olive oil, things like that. Um, you need complex carbohydrates. So these are carbohydrates that don't break down too quickly and cause sugar spikes. Dairy is always pretty good if you can tolerate it. And avoid things like highly processed foods, really sugary foods, and super fatty foods as well, as these can cause not only changes in your brain, but they can cause systemic body wide issues as well. Um, Foods that we definitely recommend avoiding, especially in the hours leading up to sleep, would be like overly fatty, spicy, or acidic foods. These can really irritate your gastrointestinal system and make it difficult to fall asleep. They also have a tendency to cause heartburn and acid reflux, which are really detrimental. Foods that make you really gassy or bloated. So if you're somebody who is prone to a lot of like gas. Um, you know, we always say fiber is good, and it is, but sometimes you should avoid super high fiber food like uncooked vegetables and beans within those hours before sleep if you're really sensitive. Alcohol is a big no no before sleep. So, alcohol, when you drink it initially, it's got kind of a sedating effect. So, you feel like it can actually put you to sleep. And for a lot of people, it does. But the problem is as it gets metabolized in your body, it turns into a different chemical that acts on your sleep centers in the brain and causes sleep fragmentation in the second half of the night. So we always say, try to avoid alcohol as much as you can before sleep. I know that's easier said than done, but it's a big no-no. And highly processed or sugary foods. So when you eat them, they give you a big, big spike in your blood sugar, um, and then you go to sleep. And as you're sleeping, you have a sugar crash, and that can make you hypoglycemic. And when you are hypoglycemic, your brain interprets this as being hungry, and hunger is wake promoting. It actually forces you to wake up so you can go eat again. So these are all really important considerations. Um, Generally, I also recommend that you discontinue meals about 3 hours before you go to bed. And this just allows you to digest your food enough that it's not going to cause discomfort when you're trying to sleep.
That was so interesting, what you said about the waking for hunger. There was just, it's like coming right to my mind. There was just a post in our Facebook group from a woman who was saying that she's in this habit and it's like debilitating where she wakes up at the same time every night, like starving, and she has to have cereal
Hmm.
at the same time every night, and, like, it's like clockwork. She wakes up and she was not able to go back to sleep until she has the the food that she is, like, craving, and when I first read that, I was like, "That's really bizarre to be just, like, woken up out of it, like, a dead sleep to
Hmm.
eat," but then the comments were like, "Oh my god, me too, me too, me too, me too, me too." Like, it was like a very widespread issue. Do you think this has to do with, like, the eating window or the kinds of food that she's eating before bed?
It's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah.
So the kinds of foods you eat before bed really matter. You want foods that are going to break down slowly, and you want foods that are not um, processed quickly. So these are foods with a very low glycemic index. So things like oatmeal, it just kind of stays in your system. It releases energy very slowly into your system, and it kind of keeps your blood sugar really stable, and also lean proteins. So, one trick you can do, so even if you feel like you're eating a really good, well balanced dinner, and you're still having this situation where you're waking up in the middle of the night, one thing that you can do is before bed, you can have a small snack that's composed of a complex carbohydrate like oatmeal and a lean protein like yogurt, for instance. And combining these two together and having that before bed is usually really, really helpful in these situations. And like I said earlier, just try to avoid sugar spiking foods. So things like juices, um, candy. Like a lot of people like to have a little bit of a sweet treat after dinner. If you're somebody who is having these issues, maybe you should just avoid sodas, things like that.
So, when it comes to the link between sleep and the health of your metabolism, say, I know that you led off with a well balanced diet, and we see so many people, it's January. And we've got big goals, and a lot of them are weight loss based. And we see people, working in very restrictive diets, cutting out entire food groups, carbs being the enemy this week. I'm sure it'll be something new next year. Um, but what effect is restrictive dieting having on our metabolism, on our then sleep cycle? And could this be a key in preventing us from maybe losing some of the weight or fat that we are hoping for?
It can be, and it's so dependent on the diet. It's so dependent on how much you're actually restricting. And it's also really dependent on the types of foods you're still allowing yourself to eat, which makes it really kind of difficult to pinpoint what exactly works and what doesn't. It's a
Right.
very much case by case situation. But I will say this. So we know that poor sleep slows the metabolism in numerous ways. So, sleep, when you're chronically lacking sleep, that is a stress inducing response in the body. The body feels like it's not maintaining health. And one of the ways that the body tries to compensate for that is focusing on survival needs. And one of those survival needs is food. So, people who are chronically sleep deprived tend to eat more food, they tend to reach for higher caloric foods, and they also tend to not be able to lose weight, even if their diet hasn't changed. And in some cases, gain weight
Wow.
because your metabolism is slowing down. So, prioritizing sleep and getting good sleep needs to be a part of your diet program. And so when you start looking at some of these diets, especially these crash diets where you go from eating what you were before to really calorie restricting, that throws your body into that survival response. And it's actually going to make you feel hungrier, and it's going to impact your sleep as well. So, for instance, I'll just give you an example. People initially, when they start something like keto or intermittent fasting, they usually experience some level of insomnia, and that's because, and let's go back a little bit even more. That's because they're experiencing unstable blood sugars. Their brain is telling them, you're not getting enough calories. You need to survive. I'm going to keep you awake so that you can go find food. And then once you find food, I'm going to let you sleep. So it's like this weird snowball effect where not eating affects your sleep, and not sleeping slows your metabolism, making it more prone to weight gain. So there needs
It's
to
almost
be
like all the systems are working together
yeah,
as one, and we
yeah,
can't just make a single vacuum and be like, "I'm focusing on this right now."
right, right, exactly. So crash dieting, this is why crash dieting usually doesn't work. Like you may initially lose some weight, but most people will rebound. Um, you really need to focus on getting on a healthier diet that isn't going to cause too much restriction. Now, that's not to say that things like intermittent fasting can't work. For some people, it really does. But you will initially experience some sleep issues in response to it.
Well, we just have to we have to define work because, often I see so many times when people are, talking about past crash diets. Well, it really worked for me. I lost 20 pounds. Mm, okay. Uh, it wasn't sustainable because we're talking about that in the past tense. So, did that work? And also, if it disrupted all of the other systems in your body, including your sleep, and slowed down your metabolism, now, what are we defining as worked? Is it just purely weight loss? Because, like, we have no idea how much of that was muscle, and we have no idea how much of that was um, not sustainable due to the fact that all the other systems around it were disrupted. So, yeah, we have to talk about what worked really means when it comes to dieting and when it comes to the way we're approaching nutrition, because whole health really has to be at the forefront or else we're just ignoring everything.
Right.
I'm so glad you said that. I didn't prompt her, you guys. I didn't tell her like we don't like crash diets here.
Yeah.
I swear.
And keep in
Um,
mind, I'm not a dietary expert. I'm not a weight loss expert, but I do work with individuals in those fields. And they all say over and over again, slow and steady weight loss that's consistent is always going to offer better results than really fast weight loss from crash diets.
So, you already know we make the best workout gear, but one of our best products, our highest rated product on our website, is actually our collagen. If you have not heard about Glow Up by CVG, you are missing out. There is almost 700 five-star reviews on this product because it is such an amazing supplement. Actually, looking at it today, there are only 2 one-stars that were meant to be 5 stars. They love the product, they hit the wrong amount of stars. This is one of our most popular products for a reason. It dissolves like no other collagen. It's type 1 and 3. You're gonna have healthier skin, better joint mobility. Everything about this collagen makes it easy to put into your daily routine. So if you haven't tried Glow Up, get on cvg.com and make sure to add it to cart today. It's our best product. So I know people are on the edge of their seat waiting to talk about sleep apnea
Mhm.
because I feel like, first of all, this is so underdiagnosed in women specifically. And the other thing is we're just starting to like scratch the surface on getting this information about sleep apnea out to the general public and like what to look for and what might indicate that they have sleep apnea. Um, Many people think it's just snoring. Like, oh, it's just annoying because, my partner just like snores really loud and that's just like that's the end all be all of the concern. What is actually going on in the brain when someone has untreated sleep apnea?
Yeah, so this is a topic I'm incredibly passionate about. It directly relates to the work that I do. I work with sleep apnea patients all over the country. So, sleep apnea is perhaps one of the most dangerous sleep disorders and also dangerous health conditions that not many people are acknowledging.
Wow.
And sleep apnea is a sleep breathing disorder. So it causes long pauses in your breathing while you sleep, usually due to a blockage in the upper airway, which results in really sharp drops in your blood oxygen levels. And for people with, moderate to severe sleep apnea, these pauses in your breathing and drops in blood oxygen levels can occur hundreds of times per hour.
Oh
Okay.
my God.
So it's not good. And right now, it's really hard to figure out how many people in America have sleep apnea because it's so under-tested and so underdiagnosed. But the current stats suggest that about 26% of our population have some level of sleep apnea, and that includes women, children, athletes, you name it. So, why is sleep apnea so dangerous? Well, every single time your blood oxygen levels drop in response to your airway being blocked, this sends a message to your brain that you are oxygen starved. So, your brain has to wake you up very briefly to restart your breathing and normalize your oxygen levels. Now, the scientific term for this is called a cortical arousal. But what these brief awakenings are doing is they're taking you out of the deeper, more restorative stages of sleep. So, deep sleep and REM sleep, where all those really important functions that we discussed earlier actually occur. So, even though you feel like you're getting enough hours of sleep per night, maybe you're sleeping 8, 9, 10, even 11 hours per night, you're not actually getting any restorative sleep. So, this causes a lot of damage in your body. Over time, sleep apnea massively raises your risk of almost every type of cardiovascular disease. So, for instance, cardiovascular disease specifically, your risk goes up by 140%. Your risk of stroke increases massively. You have a 4 times increase in your risk for most forms of cancer.
Four
And you
times?
Yes, yes. And you also have a massively increased risk for dementia, Alzheimer's, mood disorders,
Wow.
immune system disorders, type 2 diabetes, you name it. So, sleep apnea then becomes one of the leading factors in developing these diseases. For somebody who's had it untreated for a very long time, it's nearly as bad as smoking, like being a lifelong smoker. Yeah.
These numbers are blowing my mind right now because,
Mhm.
like, we're estimating, and we can consider this a low estimate because, as you said, it's very underdiagnosed.
Right.
26 per that's okay, that's a huge percentage of the population
Mhm.
with sleep apnea, and then
Correct.
those numbers of, like, 140% increase in cardiovascular, 4 times the risk of cancer, like, this is, like, a huge problem that I don't think we're equating with sleep. Like,
Right.
these diseases, like I said to you earlier, I have never heard cancer, like, being equated to, sleep disorders. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, and I mean there's a lot of theories as to why. So sleep apnea causes an incredible amount of stress to the body, and that
Mm.
also includes damage to our DNA. And as you are aware from things like smoking, and too much sun exposure, when you have damage to DNA then can become problematic, and that can make cells cancerous. So, uh, this is why. Now, sleep apnea causes our economy billions of dollars per year, because it's causing all of these diseases.
Yeah.
It's also related to things like an increased rate of motor vehicle accidents because people are so exhausted, workplace accidents, things like that. Lost working hours because people are so exhausted they can't work. So it is a major epidemic in the United States and across the world.
So you mentioned, okay, so people are not, they're having this temporary lapse in breathing, and you mentioned like an upper airway restriction.
Mhm.
Um, is this like, uh, you have a small palate? Like, what is causing this obstruction in your airway? And what are we, so like, first of all, what's the cause? And secondly, what are we doing to try to address this?
Yeah, so there used to be a big misconception that only old, overweight individuals, particularly men, get sleep apnea. And
Yes.
we know that's simply not true. And this is because those airway obstructions are caused by many different things. So, yes, obesity is a factor. Additional weight around the neck puts a lot of pressure on the airways, which can make them more collapsible. But that's not the case for everybody. Some people just have very large structures in the back of their throat. So they might have a large tongue, large tonsils, large adenoids. When we sleep, our body really relaxes, including our muscles, and the muscles of our airways lose tone. And that can cause those tissues to lax too much and collapse in on themselves and block that airflow. Another factor is that our population has much narrower airways and jaws than we used to. And this is because we really highly processed our foods. So when you're a child and when your jaw is developing, it's supposed to move out and expand. And that is caused by chewing, chew, 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 chew. So when your child is chewing on things like crunchy vegetables, tough meats, that helps those jaw structures form properly. But now we eat a lot of soft processed foods, so we don't need to chew as much. Um, we also have a lot more allergies and infections in the upper airway. So we have a lot of like rhinitis, and that causes blockage of the nose, and that causes mouth breathing. And mouth breathing also affects the development of those airways and structures. A lot of people have a family history. So if you're somebody who has a direct relative with sleep apnea, say a parent or a sibling, your risk goes up by 50% because all of those genetic
Mhm.
things that can cause like your narrow airway and large tonsils, large tongue gets passed on to you. And then there's other issues. So other health conditions can make you more prone to sleep apnea as well.
Anecdotally,
Mhm.
um, I have a neurodivergent son, and he just recently was recommended a palate expander.
Mhm.
And it was so strange because a lot of people were saying that his attention symptoms might be related to a small palate and poor sleep. And I had never heard neurodivergency sort of linked with sleep in that way of like the disruptions of this deep sleep. And then, but it makes total sense what you said in the beginning. The very first question I asked you about symptoms, it was attention it
Mhm.
was like you're like a huge factor. And then of course mood, and a lot of people experience, children with neurodivergency having these massive mood swings and meltdowns and all of these types of things. And thinking about just a something as not small, but something as minor as like the development of your palate
Mhm.
leading to all of these, it's extremely interesting to me. um what about if we have something that genetically is predisposing us, large adenoids, a small palate, multiple like issues with our sinuses where we just don't breathe that well? Um, what are some of your best recommendations for how is it a positioning thing? Is there like a way we can sleep that can like help us to breathe better? What are some of your tips and tricks for people who think that they might be experiencing some disruption due to lack of breathing?
Mhm. So it really depends on the cause.
Mhm.
The cause is a very important factor when we decide how to treat people with sleep apnea. It's not really a one size fits all situation. Certainly for pediatrics and children, almost always it's going to be tonsil and adenoid removal or reduction. And then we'll also address their jaw development. And usually that will prevent them from getting sleep apnea in the future. Or if they have sleep apnea, it will at least reduce or cure it completely.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and just going back to your comment, so one thing I'd like to add, and I love this topic, is about 25% of kids with ADHD also have sleep apnea. So it's just something to consider. There's
That's a
definitely
huge
a
number.
yeah, there's definitely a huge correlation. And I think for a lot of kids, once those breathing issues are addressed, those symptoms are lessened quite
Wow.
significantly. So if you do have a child with ADHD and like I said, not all kids with ADHD have sleep apnea, but if you do have a child with ADHD, it is definitely worth talking to their pediatrician about getting them a sleep study just to kind of rule that out. Now, going back to the topic of treatment. So, if you have diagnosed sleep apnea, if you know for sure you have sleep apnea, you need to be on a prescribed sleep apnea therapy. So, this can be something like CPAP, an oral appliance. There's various surgeries. If you're somebody who, maybe you're borderline, maybe it's not so obvious you have sleep apnea, there are at home things you can do. I still recommend you get tested for sleep
Yeah.
apnea,
Mhm.
but there are things you can do. So, one, for a lot of people, sleeping on your side as opposed to sleeping on your back can be really helpful. And this is because when you sleep on your back, you're essentially letting gravity pull all of those tissues into the back of your throat and block them, whereas sleeping on your side kind of alleviates that. It also helps with snoring for a lot of people as well. You can also use nasal dilators, nasal sprays, saline sprays. If you have like really bad nasal congestion, you can usually get a prescription. That can be very helpful. Um, you can do oral exercises called myofunctional therapy, which basically strengthen the muscles of the tongue and airways so they're less likely to fall backwards and block your airways. Myofunctional therapy usually is best when it's directed by an actual myofunctional therapist.
Mhm.
But there are techniques you can do at home, like blowing up balloons and pushing on spoons with your tongue and things like that. And then, making sure your room is well humidified is really
Good
important
one.
just to keep your airways from drying out, which can cause inflammation and swelling. Beds are really important, your mattress and pillow. So, for people who are prone to these breathing issues, you really don't want a mattress that's too soft and cushy because that can change the position of your body and neck and head in such a way that makes you even more prone to airway blockages. And having a pillow that's somewhat elevated and firm can also be quite helpful as
I
well.
I know, a lot of people are hesitant to sort of get a diagnosis because they're like, I don't want to sleep with a machine.
Uh-huh.
This is like the kind of like the same culture that told us that only overweight old men have sleep apnea has also told us that the only way to truly solve this is to sleep with this loud machine that your partner is going to be driven crazy by. And how are you supposed to sleep with your face covered? It's incredibly uncomfortable. um can you convince anybody who may have been not seeking a diagnosis just simply because they are scared of the machine? Can you convince them to go get tested?
Yes, I can. So this is so common. I hear it all the time. Like, I don't want to wear a CPAP. Are there any alternatives? Yes, there are. There are plenty of alternatives out there. Again, it depends on the use case. So people with moderate to severe sleep apnea, they usually do need a CPAP. And the reason for this is because their airways are collapsing so much that they're basically not breathing properly. And I find for these patients, even if they're initially hesitant, if you've got severe sleep apnea, the relief you feel after going on CPAP is so life changing that people really just grow to love their CPAPs and they rave about them and they'll take them everywhere. Now, for those more like mild borderline cases, you don't necessarily have to go on a CPAP. There are other options. One of the most common therapies is called a mandibular advancement device. It's an oral appliance. It's kind of like a mouth guard or a retainer that you wear at night. It doesn't involve a machine or hoses. You just pop it in when you're ready to go to sleep. It brings your lower jaw into a more forward position, and this keeps your tongue from blocking your airway. And that's really successful for people with mild sleep apnea. About 50% of sleep apnea patients have positional sleep apnea, which means they really only have sleep apnea symptoms when they're sleeping on their back.
Mhm.
So the easy change is to just get you flipped over on your side, learn how to sleep on your side, and you'll be mostly okay. There are devices you can actually wear on your body that prevent you from rolling over on your back. So it's actually pretty easy to sort that out. And it's also pretty cheap. You just have to buy a device on Amazon or whatever that keeps you from sleeping on your back. Um, Myofunctional therapy that I mentioned earlier is also pretty successful for people with mild sleep apnea. There are various surgeries if there's a really obvious anatomical reason for your sleep apnea. So if, your ENT or your sleep specialist looks in your throat and says, you've got big tonsils, then you could just take those suckers out and you're usually good to go. So, um, the risk with not treating your sleep apnea is so much higher than the risk of you feeling uncomfortable on your CPAP that I think that
Louder
really
for the
need.
people in the back.
Yeah.
You hear
L-
this, everybody?
Let's just remember all those diseases I just talked about. So if you don't get your sleep apnea treated, those diseases are very likely to be your future. Whereas if you go on CPAP, you might have like a week of discomfort, but you will eventually adapt to that CPAP and get used to it, and you will be on the road to better health.
That is everything, and I love hearing that people who were hesitant and did make the switch and said like, "Okay, I'm gonna go for it," now rave about it and say like, "Why didn't I do this sooner?" All right. I want to end with a rapid fire Q&A on sleep. And don't have to feel that you are married to these answers, but just like kind of your first instinct.
Mhm.
Magnesium, yes or no?
Yes, but with limited results. It's not a magic bullet. So if you're somebody who has difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep, a magnesium before bed can be helpful. But if you have chronic sleep issues, it's probably not going to do as much as you would like it to.
Oral or like the lotion?
Lotions, no, not really. I
Okay.
mean, um, any product that says like if you put it on your body somewhere, it's gonna improve your sleep. Not really, not scientifically proven. There are certainly things you can take orally to help your sleep.
Good to know. Um, Edibles, helpful, disruptive?
Yes, but with a lot of caveats. So, um, edibles containing THC, that THC is very relaxing and it can be sedating for a lot of people. It can help you fall asleep, um, especially if you're having a lot of issues. But over time, chronic use of those products can actually have the reverse effect. It can become very detrimental to your sleep for many reasons.
Interesting. Uh, Use a wearable to track your sleep, or it's just not accurate enough, don't even bother?
Um, it's accurate in some ways, not so accurate in other ways. I think they're really nice as a general guide. So it can tell you things like how long you slept, what time you fell asleep, what time you woke up, if you had a lot of sleep fragmentation. So I think in that sense, it's quite good, but I would not rely on them for anything medically related. So if you have a health condition or sleep disorder like insomnia or sleep apnea, I would not rely on those. I would instead see a physician.
Grounding sheets.
Not really scientifically proven, no.
Um, One of your most underrated sleep habits that if you could snap your fingers and everybody on earth had to adopt this habit to help them get better sleep, you would say it's this one.
I'm gonna give you 2 because there's 2 I really like. I mean, other than, like, the general sleep hygiene stuff, and if you're curious about sleep hygiene, you can always look it up online. There's, like, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine and the Sleep Foundation has a lot of that sort of information. One is taking a warm shower immediately before bed. So when you get in the shower, it rapidly raises your body temperature. And then when you get out, it rapidly cools you. And this mimics the process that your brain and body have to go through immediately before sleep. So you're kind of tricking your brain into thinking it's time to get tired. So that can be super helpful. Um, Second, if you wake up or you're tossing and turning because you can't fall asleep, if you do not fall asleep within 20 minutes, get out of bed, go somewhere else in your house,
Oh, I knew you
sit,
were going to say that.
yeah, sit in a quiet, dark place and do a relaxing activity for like 15 to 20 minutes and then get into bed and try again. Do not let yourself toss and turn. This raises your stress levels. This raises your cortisol levels. And that's actually going to make it even harder for you to fall asleep.
That is the hardest thing, but something I hear repeated by
Hmm.
every expert in every sleep area is just like, stop laying there.
Yeah.
Get out. Get out of there because you're making it worse.
Yeah, exactly. Your bed needs to be a place that your brain associates comfort and sleep with, not stress in. So when you feel stressed in bed, that's a no-no.
Watching TV before bed.
I would avoid. Yeah. I would cut off TV at least an hour before bed. Not only is TV very stimulating, it also tends to cause bedtime procrastination because you're like, I got to watch one more episode or I have to know what happens next. But also the light from that screen suppresses melatonin production in your brain, and that impacts your sleep.
Very, very interesting. This has been so eye-opening. I hope that oh, wait, I have to do one more because it's a personal one. Perimenopausal, menopausal women
Hmm.
waking up for God knows what reason in a giant pool of sweat.
Hmm.
Help! Help us.
Yeah, it's a tough time. So I'm almost 41, so I'm kind of right there right now. Um, Basically, what happens is when your estrogen and progesterone have a large effect on the neurotransmitters in your brain. And one of those neurotransmitters is a serotonin, and another one is GABA, and both of those are really important in regulating sleep. Um, so people in perimenopause and menopause tend to experience a lot of insomnia, sleep fragmentation, and then it also causes dysregulation of your body heat controls that can cause night sweating. Um, as far as night sweating, so the one thing that I personally do that really helps is I wear sweat wicking pajamas. So these are full body coverage pajamas that absorb the sweat away from your body so you don't wake up feeling clammy and cold. That's really helpful. A lot of women use cooling technology, so cooling mattresses or cooling
Mm.
mattress toppers as well. Um, in really bad situations, you can always get up and take a quick cold shower, to wash everything off if you really need to. It is a difficult time, and if it's unmanageable for you, there are things that can help medically. Usually, it's best to go talk to your OBGYN or a hormonal specialist that can get you back on track.
Love that. Love that for us. We're taking control of our health and we are not ignoring we are not just saying like, this is how it is now.
Hmm.
This is my lot. I'm just getting old and it sucks. It does. But this has been so eye-opening. I have so much information that I'm taking from this that I think is usable that I want to start tonight. And I think you did a really beautiful job at conveying just the importance. It
Hmm.
can't be an afterthought. It can't be like, yeah, I'll get 7 hours if like everything else goes to plan. Like it's gotta be a part of your overall health journey because without it, we are just in this huge hole of literally every kind of morbidity that
Hmm.
I mean, the numbers were staggering. So I think you did an amazing job. Thank you so much, Chelsea. This has been wonderful.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Where can our listeners hear more from you, get in touch with you, see what you're up to?
Yeah, so I'm not super active on social media, admittedly, but you can find me on
Said
my work.
every scientist ever.
I try. It's so hard to keep up with other things in my life going on, but you can find me on LinkedIn. I do a lot of media interviews, so you can always visit my work website, which is wesper.co. That's WESPER.co. Or if you have a general question about sleep, you can always email me. My email is chelsea@wesper.co.
We will put all of that in the show notes for you guys. And what amazing work you are doing in this field, Chelsea. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And everybody is going to get a better night's sleep tonight because of you. So thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot.